Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Aurora City Council's Committee of the Whole meeting. It is Monday, March 28th, 2016. Ms. Martin, please call the roll.
Ms. Farner?
Present.
Ms. Grandillo?
Here.
Mr. Hatridge?
Here.
Mr. Horvath?
Here.
Mr. Kovacs?
Present.
Mr. Cudley?
Here.
Ms. McDougall?
Present.
Mr. Vaca? Mr. Wolf?
Here.
All right, thank you. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes for March 14th, 2016.
So moved.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any additions, comments, corrections? All in favor of those minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are adopted. Finance Director's report, Mr. Clymer.
Thank you, Chairman Cudley. Good evening, Council. Just a few quick items this evening. Through the month of February, our general fund, the revenue collections are at 17% of budgeted revenue, with 16.7% of the year completed, and our expenses are at 17.1%, which is a hair above pace, but due to the timing of some payroll issues, some transfers, I'd expect that to smooth out over the course of the year, and over probably about the summertime, you'll start to see the actual number fall below budget. Secondly, it's an item that I requested to be on the new business portion of tonight's agenda. Our Tax Incentive Review Committee met last week to review our community reinvestment area abatement agreements, and I would like to present the committee's findings to your committee later this evening. And finally, I would like to convene our Treasury Investment Board at some point over the next month or two, just to update our investment policy. What we have in place right now is a bit dated. The reason it's important to you is because one of the members on that committee will be a member of council in addition to the president of council, so at some point we'll need to know which member of council is interested in serving on that board. And that concludes what I have for you right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Mr. Hatridge?
Thank you, Mr. Cudley. Mr. Clymer, and then in your second paragraph of your report, that in the coming months, I plan to ask our Treasury Investment Board to convene to evaluate our current investment policy. Our current investment policy, which governs the manner in which the city funds may be invested, was last revised in 1997, as in need of updating. I just glared out at me right away. We've been doing something for 20 years. And this is not, we have not changed our investment policies since 1997.
Someone asked.
Oh, that's the policy we've had in place. ORC, the Ohio Revised Code, dictates what we may not invest in, the duration we may invest in. And a lot of times cities, municipalities will enact their own policy to kind of tweak what the ORC permits to their liking, their comfort level. And I would just like to look at a couple other options. I mean, one example, ORC allows us to invest in maturities up to 5 years. Our policy is either 2 or 3 years. So if we could extend that 2 or 3 years out another year, if we could invest in some other federal agencies in addition to FDIC insured notes, still some very conservative options, we could increase our investment income by $50,000 per year. So that's why I think it's important to get the committee together with our investment advisor too, to kind of get a feel for what these small changes might mean to the city's.
So you're not
income.
talking about millions of dollars being moved around? I mean, I read this about tink. Whoa. I guess I'm old, and if it's not broken, don't fix it. I mean, we've been doing pretty good, so I just wanted to bring this up for the council to hear your
Mayor?
response.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hatridge, just to follow up on what Mr. Clymer said, I asked Mr. Clymer, coming in as a new treasurer, to review all of our policies, investment and otherwise, because, you know, frankly, I could not get the former finance director to really update some of the things that I thought should be looked at. So that's what he's doing, and I think that's very positive for the city. You're right, if things aren't broken, don't fix them. However, I think many of our policies need to be reviewed more regularly than perhaps they were, finance and otherwise. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment. I know that the city's been very, very strong financially, and I want it to remain that way. I'm sure it will. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Do I have a motion to accept the finance director's report?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Under new business, we have several items. The first is item A. It's a service agreement with Airbus DS for the reverse 9/11 system. Chief, you want to speak to that, please?
Members of council, Airbus is a service that provides the police department with the ability to make citywide 911 calls in event emergencies or other serious situations where we have to notify the city as a whole in an urgent matter. This particular contract was, we started doing some price comparison with another service that does the same, or another company that does the same service. And once Airbus found out we were doing that, they were able to lower the price, and we renegotiated the contract, so to speak, and saved about $4,500 over the course of 5 years. So that's what this contract pertains to.
Right, and not to confuse the people who might be watching, this does not deal with EMS or fire
No, not at all.
911 calls.
No, this is the same system as we sent out one of these calls regarding the tax scam to residents. A lot of the residents were getting hit by that, so we sent out one of those calls. So that's what this service provides.
Right, thank you, Chief. Mr. Horvat?
Thank you. I have a question for the chief.
Yes,
Chief, this is we're going into a 5-year agreement, correct?
Correct,
Okay, and we've already paid for the first year?
correct.
Okay, thanks.
thank
That's
you.
easy.
The administration's asking that this be forwarded to council for its first reading this evening.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded forward to council for a first reading. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item B under new business is the tax abatements approval. The administration is asking that this be forwarded for action this evening.
So moved.
Second.
And who's going to speak to this? Mr. Clymer?
Sure. Like I mentioned earlier, last week, our Tax Incentive Review Committee met to evaluate the status of all community reinvestment properties. We found that all properties were in compliance with the CRA agreements. There was one property of note whose employment level might come into question. The committee agreed to continue the CRA on that property under the condition that we send them a letter, request some more information, and look at them a little closer next year for the renewal at that time. And the reason for the quick emergency basis and reading on this is that we have to supply the state with the report of the TIRC's decision by March 31st.
Okay. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion before us. It's been seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you. Item C under new business is employees generally. And Mayor, you can speak to this, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of council. This is to add a backup inspector, simply a backup, not full-time, to planning, zoning, and building, and the proposed hourly rate is better than what we get with some of the inspectors. And the second person is for a part-time recreational bus driver. This is for the seniors. For their bus, as you know, we just lost at least one driver because of changes in PERS that meant he could no longer work for the city. And that's what these two appointments are. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Vaca?
Chairman, to the mayor, the backup inspector is paid out of the permits, am I correct?
Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vaca, yes, I think we take in a variety of fees that we actually use to pay for the inspections.
Yeah, if there's not enough to cover on the fees, then you have to add that to whoever's building what, is that correct? In order to cover that inspector? I mean, if the inspector has to go back 2 and 3 times for the same thing.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vaca, we have run into that problem in the past, and that's one of the reasons that Director Januska sought to redo the fee schedule this year, because we are trying to find a way to break as even as we can in those expenses. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And the administration is asking that we forward this for action this evening.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to forward this to council, the employees generally, for action this evening on council's agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item D under new business is the purchase of Dell computers. Mr. Kraus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Every year, at least for the last few years, we've been working on replacing a certain number of desktop computers as part of kind of an annual rotation, if you will, and working with Mirifex and looking at not only the specifications but the quantity, and then also getting a rough price from them. We also looked at the state term schedule. We're recommending purchasing 28 computers through Brown Enterprise Solutions. It's the same company I think we've used the last couple years as part of the state term schedule to purchase 28 computers that will be throughout various departments in the city for a total of $24,360, taking the money from the capital improvement fund.
And we need a motion to forward this to council's regular agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Horvat?
Yeah, a question for Mr. Kraus. Mr. Kraus, how many computers do we have total?
Chairman and Councilman, rough numbers around 105, give or
Okay.
take.
Okay. And the reason why I was asking, I wanted to figure out what percentage this was of our total, so it's not that bad.
The chairman and the councilman, we ideally would like to replace computers when they're about 4 years old. Depending on their age and when they were purchased, some of the numbers fluctuate a little bit. Like you may have 35 in 1 year that are over 4 years and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where we're right around that 28 to 30 number, depending on their age.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? We have a motion to forward this to council's regular agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Our last item under new business is a grant for Aurora Tree Arboretum Walk. Mr. Kraus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm guessing maybe 11 or 12 years ago, Mayor McGill had worked with one of our state representatives and had received $50,000 allocation to be used for a particular project. And over the years, we've been trying to work with the commission to figure out exactly what that could be used for. The money was earmarked initially through the Ohio Cultural Facilities Commission, but it was titled under a sports complex. So that kind of limited us with what we could or couldn't use it for. With the development of the Hartman Athletic Complex and the things we've talked about through the ad hoc committee last year and also the Tree Arboretum Walk, we worked with the commission and they determined that that portion of the project did qualify for this $50,000. They also stated that you needed to have that money appropriated this year, otherwise we would lose that money. It was something new that the state was working on. So this is the operating agreement for that $50,000. We have until November of 2017 to complete the tree arboretum, so we don't have to use all the money, but we do have to approve this year for this $50,000 to go towards that portion of the project.
And it's a matching grant, correct?
Chairman, it's not necessarily a matching grant. It's $50,000 that goes towards the project. So we have to fully fund the project. And we estimated that this would be about a $97,000 project to do the arboretum. So, but it's not necessarily we spend 50, they spend 50 or anything to that effect. It's just $50,000 was appropriated us to use.
Okay. Yeah, because on page 3 of 15, it says 3.5 local match, or I'm reading that wrong. The project sponsor shall have local contributions amounting to not less than 50% of the grant amount for the cultural project,
Under local match, 3.5.
3.5 on page 3.
Oh, yeah. Yep, it says not less than 50. We have 47,
Okay.
which is less than 50 technically.
Mr. Vaca, Mayor?
Thank you very much. We have every intention of doing whatever we have to do to comply with this, and it's, I mean, the total arboretum is probably going to be between $95,000 and $100,000, but if we need to spend a few dollars more on it for something, we will.
I mean, if it's a matching, in terms of if they're willing to give 50, we have to match it with 50, right?
If it's matching.
Yeah, if it's matching, okay,
Yes,
all right.
unless
Mr.
it specifies a different percentage.
Mr. Vaca?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's not necessarily be a 50 grand, but when can we start on this? As soon as possible, or
Mayor?
whenever would be deemed necessary?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vaca, we have a revised plan for this entire Hartman complex that we're still working on, and I don't expect that we'll start the Arboretum this year. What we're aiming to do, among other things, I'm also trying to get some broad-based support for this in the community, and we hope to, at the very least, finish some fields there this year, ball fields as well as soccer fields, which of necessity will also mean some kind of parking area there. If you'll recall, there is $350,000 budgeted this year toward this project, and we fully recognize that was just a part of the entire project. Thank you.
Mr. Vaca?
Well, you're gonna have, if you're gonna have field construction, you're gonna need equipment, big equipment. And while the equipment's there, would it not be behooved that we start on the Arboretum to level the land out anyway, to get it, while you have that machinery there? I mean, that's probably all you're gonna get done, but to wait. I don't know what's involved in this. All I know is that it's designed to take in different types of trees, families, and start from one and go to the end. But you're gonna have to do some dirt work, and as long as the equipment's there, could that not be used also?
Mayor?
Even if it took 50,000 to do it.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vaca, we expect that this project is going to be done in stages and will also likely be bid in stages. And I don't know that we have the money in the budget this year to put towards the Arboretum, because engineering costs are quite extensive as well for the project. But we will do it as efficiently as we can do it. But for the most part, our staff is not going to be doing this. We are going to bid this project.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vaca. Thank you, Mayor. Ms. McDougall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the mayor, just clarifying, the $350,000 that we put aside this year, is any of that allocated towards the Arboretum, or is all of that allocated towards sports fields?
Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. McDougall, it's not specifically allocated other than to the Hartman project. But from the figures that we used to come with Mr. Kraus, that we used to come up with that $350,000, the fields that we want to do are going to probably push that limit. Thank you.
One more question, please.
Yes.
Just again, for clarification, if we have to claim this by November. Next year. Okay, so November of 17 is when this has to be complete. Okay, so do you expect then that we'll probably be doing construction on it a year from now?
Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. McDougall, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Kraus, you wanted to add it?
Yeah, I just, and reviewing the local match, it's 50% of the grant amount, and the grant amount is $50,000. So we need 50% of that, which is 25. So the fact that we're matching, or we're going to 47 is actually fulfilling that requirement.
Right, okay. Mr. Wolf?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to point out with respect to the plans and where the Arboretum is going to, we don't know exactly where it's going to be yet. So the topography of the part of the property where it may be, may or may not need to be graded depending on where the Arboretum actually lies. So I think we're kind of still in a state of flux with respect to how everything's going to finally be laid out. So once we know that.
Okay. Mr. Vaca?
Mr. Wolf, I believe tentatively speaking, the Arboretum would be next to the, what is that, Nature Center. Now, that makes the only common sense place to put it. Anywhere else would be out of character. This would be a buffer zone between that particular property and our proposed sports complex. I think if I saw the last layout, that's where it was going to go, and then a parking lot in front of it. So, in case you haven't seen it, that's what I had seen at the last tree commission meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I have seen it.
Oh, you have
The committee, what the committee approved is not what is currently on the table. So we are reviewing what is being proposed as a change.
Okay.
So what you have seen is an actual proposed change to what has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys good?
Yeah, we're good.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vaca. Not approved by council and not approved by the administration. This is merely the recommendation of the ad hoc rec committee, and we are trying to accommodate our neighbors in this design, and that's why the Arboretum, as you correctly noted, has been suggested to be moved along the Audubon property to the north.
Okay, so we have a plan that's in process. Very good. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Hettridge?
Thank you, Mr. Culley. I believe the total acreage out there is 138 acres, is that correct?
Chairman of the Council, 127.
Okay, and do we have planned anywhere how many acres are going to be dedicated to this Arboretum?
Chairman of the Council, and that's part of the kind of plan revision. We have an idea. I don't know what the acreage is on that area, but we kind of have the area where we go. So once we get through these tweaking, if you will, of the plan, then the next step, obviously, the plan will then have to go to Planning Commission for conditional zoning. So at that point, will become public,
Okay,
good to go
Thank you.
plan.
So the amount of acreage are in the process of being planned.
yeah,
Very good.
that's how I got it.
Okay. Kind of summarize that up. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Mayor, don't complicate this, Mayor.
I won't, Mr. Cudley. Members of council, we are trying to do this carefully. And rather than going right ahead and taking it through the administrative steps that we need to take it through, frankly, I have told Mr. Kraus that I wanted to meet with certain members of council that were particularly impacted or could be impacted by this and go over it with them to get feedback, because we've already gotten some feedback from the community. So that's why it's not immediately going through the official process. We want your input. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Barner?
Sorry, just real quick. Had to get my word in, or the root of the problem, kidding. Having said that, has the feedback been pretty proactive? I would think that for what will be an amenity to the city, and obviously taking a cautious process, will just make it that much nicer. But I'd be interested in hearing the feedback, because I haven't heard other than the planning part of it. Thank you.
All right, Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barner, I would say yes. Mrs. Barner, sorry about that.
It's okay.
I've gotten that too, so, oh well. Mr. Mayor. I think once it goes through the process, it will be a little more public, but, I mean, the ABL, for instance, knows we're working on this. They want the fields. We've had discussions with the Audubon Society because it was important, from my perspective, that we have a peaceful coexistence with them, even though we might develop this property. So, we're trying to be sensitive and also to council members' concerns or issues. And, it's a deliberative process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we need a motion to forward this to council for,
Second.
excuse me, we need
Sorry,
to
John.
forward we need to have a motion to forward this to council for its regular agenda.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's best that we know what we're motioning before we motion it. So, seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes, and unfortunately, we're out of time, so we need to have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.
You can't blame